Crime dips to historic lows. Grisly murders skyrocketing. America enters golden age of safety. You're going to die? Oh, come on. Look, last year's presidential election was bewildering for everyone involved. But if you followed the news, you might have come away a little confused about one issue in particular.
Crime has continued to drop, including murders. So there is...
You're wrong.
No, I'm not.
Murders are up.
Thankfully, election season is behind us. But this question about the crime rate? It's not going anywhere. In fact, if you do a quick Google search for news about crime, you get headlines that are just as contradictory. So what's the deal? Is violent crime up or down? And why can't anyone agree? Do we even keep track of this stuff? Well, first of all, yeah, we do. The FBI has been collecting crime statistics from law enforcement agencies since 1930. And every year they put out a document called Crime in the United States. It's like a Bible for crime stats, and it's used by anyone reporting on these issues. So if reporters are using the same source, how are they getting totally different answers? Well, the key here is that what's up with the crime rate is a very simple question with a very complicated answer. You can break down crime stats by time period, place, percentage of population, and each of those filters will give you a different answer. Take the murder rate. If you look at the last couple decades, you can see that the murder rate in the US has been declining pretty steadily since the mid-90s, with little bumps along the way. And if you're thinking, wait, what's your source for that chart? Well, A, way to be a savvy media consumer, and B, we literally downloaded the FBI's raw data and plugged it into Excel. Ta-da! Anyway, the murder rate is way down since the early 90s, like cut in half, way down. But remember all those little bumps along the way? We're in the middle of one right now. According to the FBI, there were 10% more murders in 2015 than in the year before. And that upward trend appeared to continue last year too. So it is correct to say both murder was at historic lows in 2015 and murders rose 10% in 2015. You just have to keep this chart in mind. That 10% spike is troubling, especially if you live in a city like Chicago, where a sharp increase in murders is helping drive up the national average. But even with cities like Chicago in the mix, the murder rate is still lower than 10 or 20 or even 30 years ago. In other words, it comes down to which data sets you're comparing. Criminologists argue that a 1 or 2 year change in crime is not nearly long enough to determine a meaningful trend. But tell that to the news media. Last year, the New York Times announced that homicides had doubled in Las Vegas, even though they were only comparing murders in the first quarter of 2016 to the first quarter of 2015. That's a tiny time period to evaluate. Look, the point here is that asking, has crime gone up or down, is a little like asking, are humans happier? Which humans? Where? Compared to when? It's just too broad a question, and you have to dig into the data to really learn anything. Unfortunately, most Americans haven't gotten that memo. According to national opinion pollster Gallup, for the past 25 years, Americans have mostly thought of violent crime as rising, even though, again, basically, the opposite is true. So what's going on here? Well, as with many other things, it may come down to brain wiring. Psychology studies dating back to the 1960s have pointed to a mere exposure effect, showing that repeated exposure to information makes you like it more. Now pair that with the news media's obsession with crime stories, and you might end up with a pretty dark view of safety in America. And true to form, a number of studies have shown very convincing links between consuming news media and fear of crime, regardless of actual crime rates.
Gosh.
Now pair that with the fact that for all our statistics and criminologists, no one really knows what caused the great crime drop. In the end, a bunch of stats and uncertainty just might not be a match for good old-fashioned fear-mongering. So here's the question. If murders were up 10% in 2015, but also at 30-year lows, how do you write a headline that's not misleading in either direction? Why don't you give it a shot? Give us your best and most fair headline in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe.